Will the lightweight division ever get any new contenders? Before we get into that, if you're new here, make sure you subscribe as we have brand new videos every single week. So, of course, the lightweight division is incredibly stacked, but the top guys are just dominating everyone below. You've got Justin, Dustin, and Charles Oliveira just destroying anyone who's attempting to come up and then aiming for that shot with Islam. But while we're on the topic of Islam, we have him rematching against Charles Oliveira. Mark, is this a fight that you're even interested in seeing?
I wasn't, but the closer we get, I'm getting there. It's livening up a little bit for me. I think especially after the round one finish of Beneil Dariush, it just feels like Oliveira. It did say in an interview that he's not really made any adjustments, but that could just be talk. I believe that Oliveira is going to try and make the necessary adjustments in order to give Islam a proper fight, seeing as how the first one was a bit of a wreck.
Yeah, a bit of a wreck's an understatement. And to be honest, I'm not that excited for this fight. I don't see what will be different this time around. I'm fed up of seeing rematches. I want new contenders, and it's such a weird complaint, isn't it, to be complaining about a stacked division and having loads of contenders, but it feels like it's just the same guys on a loop coming in and out constantly, and it just feels like that's going to happen with Charles. But with Charles's sort of wild style, maybe something magical can happen, but we'll have to wait and see. But the big problem is, say if Charles does manage to beat Islam and does pull off something magical, then what? Do we then get Islam versus Oliveira 2? Because 3. Because don't forget, Charles was offered an instant rematch, even though he'd had one title defense against Islam, but he turned it down and fought Beneil instead. So why would they not give Islam that same opportunity to have the rematch?
It's a tricky situation because, like you say, it's almost like they're all owed rematches somewhere along the line, and they're just cashing them in. It makes sense for the business for UFC, but as fans, sometimes you just think, "What again? We're getting that again? Like, come on, we've got to go back." It's almost like redemption sort of thing. But I think Charles realizes that if he does lose this, then that's probably him. He won't be getting a title shot. He's got a bit of work to do until he gets into that position again. So I think that's why we're going to see a different Charles. I think we're going to see more of a fight this time round. And I think Islam, he'll have his work cut out for him this time. In saying that, he'll finish Charles in the first round. Now I've said that.
Well, while we're on the topic of rematches, there's another rematch that is lined up for Islam, and that's Alexander Volkanovski. He's biting at the heels of this division. Do you think that he's going to come out and get another rematch straight after Oliveira, or do you think that Islam should maybe fight some other contenders, maybe someone like Justin or something like that?
I think Volk's got to get through Tuporia first at featherweight. That's almost like the last of him cleaning up that division. Then he can move on. Whether he wants to vacate the belt and make a lightweight run, or he just wants to go up and get that double champ status is another story. But Volkanovski can certainly come in. Again, like you say then, Islam's only defenses, if he does get that second Volk match, has just been rematches. You're like, come on, we've got to move forward. We've got to press forward with this division. Oh, don't get me wrong, it was a great fight, but I think the division has got more to offer than just, again, rematches. It's just the stature of Volkanovski, isn't it? Is considered the featherweight GOAT. So you're like, all that attributes, bring it forward into the lightweight division. He could fight anyone and it would be exciting just off name value alone.
Yeah, 100%. But now, even still, there's this problem with this title match. Say if Charles does win and Islam doesn't take the rematch, Charles would then fight Justin again, right? And again, it's another bloody rematch. That's the issue. And that's what's winding me up. And that's kind of the whole point of this video is it's constant rematches, and the same people fighting each other on loop. Would you want to see Charles versus Justin again?
I mean, the first one was back and forth. It only lasted a round, well, less than a round. But when it's like that, they've both gone off and had a few other fights as well. Then it feels a little bit fresher to come in and have that rematch again, rather than just constant on repeat rematch, rematch, rematch. It felt very much like Volk versus Max. Are we just going to do this indefinitely until Max wins or something? But when they've both gone off, done a few other things, you know, Justin's come out and knocked Dustin Poirier out in the second round. That's very impressive. And now he's the BMF champion. So you could always build that as champ versus champ, all that kind of thing. And Justin will give Oliveira a great fight. You know, he dropped him a couple of times. He blooded him up in the first one. So that rematch would be a potential opportunity that I'm more open for, that I'm more excited for, rather than just on loop, like you say.
Yeah. But it is a problem, isn't it? These fights constantly on loop. And then obviously you've got Dustin Poirier. You know, where is he going to be sat now? Because it feels like he's sat at this top of the division. He's already said, I'm not interested in fighting people like Beneil Dariush. I don't need to fight for money. I'm just going to fight big fights. So then where does Dustin go? Does he fight the loser of Charles and Islam? And if Charles loses, which he's probably going to do, then we get another rematch. And he's just winding me up now. It's the same guys. So then what? What happens then?
That's true as well, because if Dustin just wants the legacy fights now, he's fought everyone else except Islam. And he's coming off a loss, so he doesn't deserve that title shot, surely. So you go, well, again, him and Oliveira, it's another rematch. And you go, but the first one was so good. Again, Oliveira, his fighting style makes a lot of things exciting as well. Aside from the Islam fight, all the other ones have been back and forth, you know. So it opens up a potential for a rematch that I'm interested in. but I wouldn't be complaining too much if that was to happen. But again, where does Dustin go? Like you just asked, he's coming off a loss now, head kick knockout loss. So I don't think we'll be expecting him back anytime soon. But what the hell, man? Who knows?
I know, right? And that's why it's such a tricky division. And the thing is, you know, we keep talking about if Charles wins or if Charles loses, but if Islam wins and he's still the title holder, and Justin comes up, and then Dustin comes up, and then Charles comes back up again, that's your top three guys have all had 2 title shots and failed both of them, right? So, you know, Justin and Dustin have both lost to top very capable grapplers like Oliveira and Khabib. And I'm not saying Islam's the same as Khabib, but it does feel like, you know, it's like a spiritual successor almost. Could you see Justin or Dustin even coming close to beating Islam, or do you think it's just going to be a repeat of history and they've kind of sealed their fates already?
I could see it being almost identical to the Khabib fights. It'll be a submission loss for both of them. Dustin, you'd think that he'd do a little better just because of Justin's style. But yeah, ultimately, I don't think anyone in the lightweight division right now can offer Islam anything he hasn't seen before, and he won't be able to get through with relative ease. Might get a few cuts and bruises, but Volk was the only one I think who could really, really test him, and that's him coming up a division. But I think that's testament just to how good Alexander Volkanovski is.
Yeah, and well, sort of talking about people not in the current lightweight division, we've got the lightweight goat himself, Conor McGregor, planning to return next year. Do you not agree, Mike? Do you not agree? Obviously, you know, obviously I'm joking, but Conor and Chandler are hopefully planning to fight next year, and there's no doubt that the winner of that will be really pushed up in sort of that top contender of that lightweight division, even though the fight's likely going to be at 170, which is just ridiculous, but unfortunately it is what it is. So if Chandler wins this fight, Mark, against Conor, where does Chandler go from there? Because don't forget, he's already lost to Charles, Justin, and Dustin. So again, another rematch, or he jumps up and fights for a title shot against Islam.
Well, I find it quite hard to still maintain a level of interest in this fight, to be honest, because it's been zigzagging for so long now. So it's hard to sort of plan out potential opportunities. Where could either fighter go, you know, because by the time we actually get that fight, we will have had these 100 rematches that we're talking about now. So that I think the division will look very different by the time we've actually had this fight. And, we might have even imagine if Oliveira wins or loses and he might even retire or something. It wouldn't be the most out of the blue thing, would it? So the division could get really shaken up. But when you're
Yeah.
fighting someone like Michael Chandler, I think the opponent has to make sense as well. You couldn't just put him against Diego Sanchez or something and expect the fight to do well, to sell everywhere. So it really does depend on the wins and losses after. I know that's a bit of a cryptic and not really an answer, but you understand what I mean, though?
Kind of, yeah. But do you think that if Chandler did beat Conor, that he'd deserve a title shot? Because I've seen people talking about it'd make Chandler this superstar overnight. And we've talked about it before. The UFC doesn't make fair booking, it makes the right booking for business. And so if Chandler did become this big superstar, perhaps possibly they could give Chandler a title shot against Islam. Do you think that's possible, or do you think that's a bit of a pipe dream for a lot of fans?
I don't think it's fair. It's possible, but I don't think it's fair. Because can you imagine if Chandler, when he knocks out Conor McGregor in devastating fashion, Dwayne, then he just bypasses Oliveira, Dustin, and Justin. Says, "See ya, I'm jumping way ahead of you just for beating up Conor, who hasn't won a fight since early 2020." It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But like you say, doesn't make fair bookings, makes realistic bookings that will make money. So you go, well, would Islam versus Chandler sell? Obviously it would, but would it do extremely as well as X versus Islam? It's a strange
It's
realm that we're in, isn't it? And like I say, it depends what the lightweight division looks like by the time this fight actually takes place.
Yeah, and it's a hard fight to buy into, isn't it? Chandler versus Islam. I love Islam. He's one of my. I love Chandler, should I say? He's one of my favorite fighters. But he's going to get demolished if he fights someone like Islam, right? But then, of course, I know we don't know if Conor is going to fight or not, or when he'll next fight again. But if he does beat Chandler, you know what the UFC are like. A former two champion, they're going to push him up there in whether it's 170 or 155. Because you could just imagine the pay-per-view buys for Islam versus Conor McGregor. That is just ridiculous. I mean, it's not a fight that should be happening, but unfortunately, it probably would happen. And it's just a real shame that the UFC book in this way, right?
Well, that's the thing. It's because it is a business and it has to make money, so it has to make fights that will sell. And Islam versus Conor would do ridiculously well. Does he deserve it? Hell no. No, he deserves to be nowhere near that title. He's got a lot of work before he deserves to even think about a title shot. But I think that's testament to. We've spoke about this in previous videos, Dwayne. I believe because the hype is still there from his featherweight run, and obviously when beating Alvarez to become the double champ. And I think the UFC has moved on since then.
Yeah.
It's not just held back by one guy. Right, granted, he did a lot of money and generated a lot of money and new fans for them. But at the same time, you have to be able to move forward with it. Conor couldn't go out and try an acting career for 10 years, come back and go, I won't mind another belt on my wall, actually. And they go, oh, well, go on then, let's have a go. I think there's got to be a fair balance of fairness and money generating wealth.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's not, as we've known before, I'm the biggest Conor fanboy in the world, but even I wouldn't want to see him get a title shot off a win from Chandler. I think if he does beat Chandler, he's beating the top 5 guys, so he'll probably be put in the top 5 rankings. So, I think a fight with either Charles or Justin could be really, really fun and exciting. And I don't want to see another Dustin fight, at least not yet. I think if they do, it'd have to be a while, but then they'll both be old men. It'll be kind of pointless. I could see Conor versus Justin for the BMF. That's a fight that sells super, super well. And kind of like the fights that Conor should be taking, right? Like these sort of, I don't want to say exhibitions because that's not the right term, but these sort of big, over the top, just fun, extravagant fights, that kind of thing, really. I think
high profile matchups.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. So we've talked a lot about sort of the old guard and these top guys. Is there anyone you think could move up into the lightweight division and really cause some problems for these top guys?
I'll pull out maybe a dark horse here, and I'll say Alexander Volkanovski, because I think you look at the top 10. Granted, like we've said, it's stacked before, but there's no one there where you instantly think, oh, yeah, they could really, really push forward, because we've seen contenders come up and up and up and then just fall. And I think Alexander Volkanovski, presuming he gets through Tuporia, like I said, he could just make that transition into lightweight. Whether he wants to make a run at the lightweight or just become a double champ, I think he gives the top contenders so much trouble. Look at what he did to Islam. He very nearly won that fight. It was so close. And so that just proves he can hold his own with the division above. And, I'd like to be able to see him smash his way through. Is there anyone chomping at the bit in your mind?
Yeah, someone actually from a very similar area, Dan Hooker. I think a lot of people have forgot about Dan because, he took some risky fights. He came out, fought Chandler in his debut. He's lost to Dustin. He took a short notice fight with Islam, and then he went down to 145 and got knocked out. But when you're taking these kind of risks, unfortunately, those things can happen to you. But I think people are forgetting how good Dan Hooker is. People need to remember he nearly finished Dustin, and he gave him one of the best fights I've ever seen in the octagon. And I think that he's chomping at the bit, and he's going to jump back up that division very, very quickly. I think he can hang with Gamrot, Faziev, all those guys. I think he can do really well. And then we could see him fight people like Justin, Oliveira, and then coming back for that title shot. And it's something that I'd really, really like to see. Or I could be wrong, and maybe Dustin will just gonna keep getting battered and we won't see him again. But we'll have to wait and see. But I think the problem with this lightweight division is he's so top heavy, and it's a strange complaint to have, of course, because you want great contenders coming up and you want great top guys, but I think the top guys are just a bit too great and they're stopping everyone else from coming up. But I do think that's all we've got time for. Thank you for watching. If you can like, comment and subscribe, it really does help us out.